Right.
Start recording. Okay. Hello there. Thank you for joining me.
Hi. Hi,
Uh,
Prot.
hello. Let's start with the basics. What is your name and what do you do in general?
All right. My name is Ag, and it's very simple. I am also known, at some point, I've earned a name. Uh, I'm known as Emacs Tips because at some point I started posting tips on Emacs, and I mean, like I was learning something, and I was like, oh, this is a new thing I learned. I wanted to share, and it became a thing. And I started learning, and I've learned a lot through those like small, very precise, like kind of very small tips that that will take you a minute just to look, and mostly was just gifs of certain things. And yeah, that's who I am. I'm a programmer. I've been making software for some years now, but basically that's I am. Who I am.
Okay, okay. And so, of course, Emacs tips for somebody who is not aware. Basically, it's a reference to Emacs. So the
Right.
Emacs part. So you would be sharing tips about how to do stuff in Emacs, I guess.
Yes, yes. At some point, I was just like, I found a small thing, and then I shared, and like I was so surprised so many people that know about it, and I started finding more things, and I was like, oh, maybe I need to share this, and I would start the conversation like that, and it started a thread and interesting discussions. I met a lot of interesting people throughout the years. Being involved, and it's very fascinating world. I I found the fascinating world of Emacs not from just the perspective of computing, but from the social perspective.
Mm.
A lot of times we uh, we don't realize that there's not like we're not like just trying to solve technological problems, but mostly it's like socio-technological problems. It took me a long time to realize that crafting software means working with people, not working with
Mm.
software or different technologies.
Yeah, yeah, very important. When did you start your involvement in the Emacs community? Or let me say this: did you get involved in the Emacs community as soon as you started using Emacs? And if so, when did that
Oh
happen?
no, no, my Emacs journey. You see, it took me years to actually realize that I needed Emacs in my life because I mean, multiple times I came to it, and it was hard because Emacs is difficult. We tend to, especially after like certain time, and it often happens not just with Emacs, with like any sophisticated piece of technology. We often forget the beginner's journey, and I try to remember my journey, my own journey, when I came to Emacs. It was interesting, it was fascinating, and it was scary. And I I gave up, and then I came back again because the curiosity kept like kicking, and I was like, why I couldn't do this? And it was just like, there are multiple, there's emotional factors like ego, and I kept seeing Emacs, and I was like, um, and I was using IntelliJ at the time, and IntelliJ was not like my first IDE, but at that time I was reaching the point when it was like over 7 years of like very advanced use of IntelliJ. I knew IntelliJ to the point that I knew like very advanced, like poorly documented, undocumented features. I tried making plugins. I talked to the people on the IntelliJ, like on the team at JetBrains. I felt like I'm working with them because I was very fascinated. It's absolutely amazing set of tools, and I was afraid for a long time that if I move to Emacs, I will not be able to find certain if I like certain features, and it turns out to be like sink of time, and I was thinking, oh, like maybe I can't go back, neither go back nor, and like I will never be happy. But I was so wrong. I found more that I could, I could imagine in the world of Emacs, and not just from the perspective of like features available to you, but the certain mindset it sets you in, which is very familiar to anybody who spent like considerable amount of time doing writing Lisp or doing Emacsing.
Yeah, yeah. That mindset part, I think, is the key, because I am curious. Okay, you engage with Emacs, you disengage, and this keeps happening until something clicks. Could it be the mindset? Like there is this aha moment where you're like, okay, I get the Emacs way of approaching this.
Yeah, I think there's uh, I realize there's not there's a lot of tacit knowledge, right? Like there's certain explicit knowledge that you can like go through the tutorials, you can understand like certain basics, you get like, oh, like I need to like find this, and like there are certain answers you can find by just googling things. But like the Emacs community, it's good that Emacs community accumulated like such a lot of like enormous amount of wisdom. It's fascinating how like if you search on GitHub alone, there's so much eLisp code that is it's very surprising, and I feel like there is more eLisp code than Common Lisp and Clojure and other Lisp combined, and that's very interesting. Even though this is a language that has like it's not a general use programming language. It has one specific use, and it's still it's very popular. I mean, relatively popular language for and this knowledge accumulated. It's mostly it doesn't get stale. It doesn't get deprecated most of the time. Like the things like 10 years ago, they still to a certain degree they have their relevance, right? Like there's a lot of explicit knowledge, but there's also tacit knowledge that nobody can teach you. Nobody can teach you like real, like they can. I compare it with like bicycle riding or like swimming, right? Like you can learn a lot of theory. You can sit in the car like watching somebody drive, but it will never explain to you all this theory, the documentation, reading manuals will not explain the simple joy of bicycle ride, right? You have like this tacit knowledge that you have to go through, and at some point, and for me, I think there was like it wasn't just like, oh, like this is it, this is the moment. It was like through stages. I First I was like fascinated by certain things, and I think at some point I found the search facilities of Emacs, and that was just like that sold me. Like the ways how you can do search, perform search in Emacs in like all sorts of ways, like slicing, dicing, like grouping, sorting things, like searching with context, searching like this way or that way, and that was just like wow, I never seen that. How you could, it's just search alone was like I'm sold on this. I want Emacs in my life because the way how I can search through things, I'm just like I've never seen this before. But that was one of the things, and like gradually I found like more and more things, and I can like the list goes on, right? Like, and it's virtual and limited like possibilities. Like you get to the point where like, oh, I learned something about like calc today, and it's like wow, this is fascinating. I have no idea that this was possible, right? So yeah, it went through stages. I can't say like there was a single aha moment. I had like multiple aha moments, and it's fascinating that even after years of using it, I still like sometimes, oh, like wow, this is interesting. I had no idea that like this works this way. It's just very cool, very amazing.
And how did you start learning about all these? Like, were you rolling your own configuration? Were you learning from other people? Was there some starter kit? How was it for you?
Uh, I'm a Vimmer. I mean, like, I am a diehard Vimmer because, and Vim for me, and when I say Vimmer, it's not a specific piece of software, because Vim is, it's a certain mindset, right? Like, it's a certain, like, kind of like, I basically, when Git came out, and at that time we were using different, like, I think we were using some very difficult things, we had Microsoft Foundation server, and it was a really good software, like the suite of, like, the different tools. And worst part of it, like, by far most part of it, was the version control. And for some reason, we, like, my team decided to use that instead of other, like, and, like, ignore other features of Team Foundation server. And then Git came out, and I started studying Git, and by default, Git installs, it, like, sets Vim as your editor. And when I was trying to learn, like, do something, the Vim pop up, and I was like, oh, like, the first time I'm seeing this, I was confused, and I said, like, I can't deal with that. But then it struck me, like, Git is such a brilliant piece of software. Why did they choose Vim as their default, like, editor? And I started learning about Vim. And usually when I try to learn something new after the basics, after the Wikipedia page, I invariably, most of the time, I Google something like, why this thing sucks, right? I try to find, like, compelling reasons and compelling, the arguments for, against that thing. I want to be skeptical. I want to remain skeptical. And I found, like, good reasons to actually try Vim. And I tried Vim. I hated myself. For, like, probably a month. And then finally clicked, and after that, I just couldn't go back. And from that point on, I didn't even use Vim that much. The Vim, the editor itself, my Vim config was always like, throughout the years, was not, like, very complex. I didn't, like, use a lot of features that people use, but I always found Vim navigation in other apps, in, like, every single editor I would, like, try to use, I would use with Vim navigation. And there was a person I was following, their Vim configuration, the way how they do things in Vim, and at some point, that person, they moved to Emacs, and I was like, whoa, now what I do? And I try to follow their steps, try to, like, just blindly copy their config, and I was totally lost. But I tried multiple times. It was hard. Emacs was, like, difficult. Like I said, I give up, and then I came back again. And at some point I found that I have, like, multiple pieces of, like, multiple different editors. I had IDE, I had Sublime, I had Atom, I had something else, and Emacs. And at some point I said, like, well, that has to stop. I mean, like, it's impossible to, like, juggle all these apps, and, like, they basically editors. I need to choose one thing and try to stick with it. And I said, like, I'm gonna try using just Emacs for maybe a week or 2 weeks, and every time I get stuck, I feel stuck, I will just sit down, hunker down, and I try to find answers. And that worked. And then it was, I think it was around this time of year, right? Like, it was around, like, September, October, and by the time of the New Year came, and IntelliJ changed their, like, the model, it becomes subscription model. And I needed to update my license, and I realized I didn't even, like, touch the IntelliJ for months, and that was fascinating. I was like, wow, I never expected this to happen to me. ever, because that was my go-to tool. I was happily paying the license fees, and I was absolutely happy, content with it. And I just didn't know better. I just didn't know there's a like entire world of possibilities, of things that like possible.
So were you able to consolidate all these different editor-related requirements in Emacs? So you say Sublime and Atom and IntelliJ. I imagine
Yeah.
those were doing different tasks. Were you able to manage those inside of Emacs, or were you still struggling after?
No. There's, I mean, like Emacs to me is not. It's like, sometimes people like ask me, why do you want to do everything with like in Emacs? And I'm like, no. Here's the correction. I don't do everything in Emacs. I do everything through Emacs. Emacs is a kind of like a like a, a converging point where like it's like my control kind of room that I can talk to different like pieces of software, and I that kind of model is just like, I realize there's a lot of plain text related tasks, and anytime you need to dance around like just plain text, Emacs is just the king. It's like nothing else just in my experience comes even close when you need to extract a piece of text, and a lot of times you do. Like like this is a recent example. I was talking to my colleague. We do a lot of like Zoom sessions, and he was showing me different things going like, from website to website, like, following links, opening like Slack conversations. And I just didn't want to bother with like, hey, slow down, I'm trying to take notes. Hey, can you share this link? And he was like talking, and I was like completely honestly, I was so sure that I will forget this stuff, because I'm like, I like to take notes. I like to that's why I like taking notes in Emacs, even when I watch videos, because I can control video playback directly from Emacs, because this is the best for note taking, and I can extract like on like while being in the zone, in like, focused on the things. I can extract like pieces of text at whatever task it is, right? And then I sit down, and I said, I need to I need to solve this problem for myself. When somebody's sharing something and I see a lot of text, I see it. If I see it, like, it means computer can see it. And I figured out a workflow where I would select a piece of screen and send to Emacs and it calls Tesseract. I never heard about Tesseract at that point. Tesseract turns out to be a like very old CLI tool to OCR text, and it does it. It does it beautifully, and it works for me. It was like, wow! It didn't take me even 15 minutes. I was so like, this is a specific problem, and I solved it with Emacs, because I'm like, how did I not get this like for so many years in my life? I just didn't get like this kind of a mindset of like hacking mindset, right? Like when you don't go with the status quo, when you just like, it wouldn't even occur to me before Emacs that I would want to do this, right? Like it would, maybe it will, like, I would think, this is a problem I want to solve. Are there like some apps can like do this? I'll probably complain, why can Zoom do that, right? Like, why can't they build this feature? And I probably would forget about it, and it would just go like, like everybody else, right? Like, tap, wait, like, and even today, like certain tasks I do, it's not just faster or make me they don't make me more productive maybe, but they definitely keep me happier. I try to find joy in everyday, some menial tasks, like the tasks that you have to do manually, waiting for something to happen. Like it feels like it's not like you're in control. It's like as if computer are walking you, like, like my dog. I don't walk my dog; he walks me sometimes, right? So that feeling I try to avoid.
Yeah, and this speaks to the mindset you alluded to earlier, where it's like, well, I have now been conditioned by Emacs to think in terms of how do I control this through Emacs, or how do I interface with this, whatever this is, through Emacs, rather than being hopeless in the face of a feature that is not there, basically.
Right. I mean, like the mindset is interesting. I was recently talking to someone, and I said, there's a concept of in science. What was the word? There's hold on. I'll find my the quote that I mean, like I wrote it. I just
Yeah, of course, of course. If you have it.
So hold on. It's anyway, I can't find it right now. Like, momentarily. So the point I'm trying to make, there are like certain aspects of Emacs change your, and it's like, I don't know if it's Emacs or it's because it uses Lisp underneath and Lisp drives it, right? And that, here I was saying there's a concept in science called Umwelt, right? It's a German word. It in German, if I remember right, it like exactly means environment, right? So it's basically a specific way in which organisms of it, like, particular species, they perceive and experience the world, shaped by their capabilities of their sensory organs and, like, perceptual systems. And that concept is fascinating because, like, animals, like, they see the world differently. And learning Lisp, I think it, like, for me at least, it felt transformative. It changes how you perceive the computational model. It, like, when we look at Lisp code, we don't just say like, this is code as data. We see the patterns that they're internalized in our brains, and it becomes like kind of a perceptual reality where I see structure when a lot of people see like a lot of parentheses. Like, I see structure, I feel structure. I kind of like know how, like, I feel it, like, live through these patterns. It, like, it shapes how you think about the problems. But it also, like we discussed, like, just earlier, it also kind of creates profound pedagogical a challenge that you cannot explain the mechanics of Lisp and REPL-driven workflow. But until somebody has that aha moment, and it's just like, it's almost impossible to tell them. They look at things and they're like, well, it's it's hard to read to me. It just feels alien. It's just like, it's different. And, like, like, I don't like these aspects, or like and I'm like, well, you might not be seeing what you're seeing it because your perceptual like reality, it's not the same as mine, right?
Yeah, correct. Once you get used to reading Lisp code, I think there is no going back. But until you reach that point, it's a struggle.
Right. I mean, like, for me, REPL-driven workflow, Emacs actually, like, made me realize that I want Lisp in my life. For some reason, I never received, like, I perceived Lisp as like Fortran, something that is very old and not very relevant anymore, right? We learned some lessons from it, but that's it. And I just like, and when I found Lisp, I was like, whoa, let me go like deeper. And I found like, what is like happening in the world of Lisp. And I found Clojure. And after like, at that time I was doing front end, mostly working with front end, writing, like making web apps. And at that point, I tried all, like not all, but like most popular script options, right? Like TypeScript. I was one of the first, like, people jumping on the TypeScript wagon. I'll get to that, but why? For the reasons. Then CoffeeScript, LiveScript, Gorilla Script, Ice CoffeeScript. Then I tried Haskell-y things. I tried JCJS. JCJS at that point, it was not ready for production. I'm like, the Hello World emitted an app that was 50 megabytes, and that was the compressed. And I was like, whoa, that's definitely not like, I'll have to wait for maybe for a few years until this becomes like, production ready. But then I tried ClojureScript, and like things made sense. I was like, whoa. Like I really like it. It just like after all these options I tried, this stuff makes sense, and I quit my job on the spot. And that was very well paid job. It was 10 minutes away, like 10 minutes away walking distance from my place. That is just like a dream job by American standards, by any standards, right? And it was well paid, good startup. I came to work, and I said, like, I saw things I cannot unsee. I have to do it. You regret things you never done in life, right? Like not things you've done in life, but like things that you haven't done. And I quit on the spot. But I was like thinking, well, at that point I was in SFB area. And I thought, like, well, like, what's the worst thing can happen? It's not like I would have to go to tell my kids, hey, guys, I mean, like, daddy wants to write some Lisp. Can you not, like, eat for 2-3 months? Right? Like, this is not going to happen. I was like, the worst case, I will find something, like, to do with TypeScript or Python or, there are a bunch of things, or Java. Like, I can go, like, certainly, program in any language, but I want to write programs with joy, right? And I just can't explain the enormous joy when I write things in Lisp. I think I'm like a very impatient programmer. I want to see results right away. It doesn't. See, that's why for a long time I was doing front end, because of the feedback loop, right? Like with front end, it's like when you make mistakes, you can see it. Like somebody can point at them and say, like, oh, this color is wrong, or like, this gradient, or like this animation is like choppy. With backend, sometimes you won't see your results of your work for months, like, until somebody finds something in the logs or say like, oh, like our S3 bucket's like acting weird, or like something, right? That's why for a long time I was like, oh, my mindset is just not good. I'm not a good programmer, especially backend programmer. I was like, I'll just stick with front end. I like front end with all its mess, all with like, the JavaScript crap, and I was fine with that. But then Clojure changed my perspective. It turned me, impatient programmer, into like, and I just like this joy of writing Lisp programs. I feel like I don't feel like I'm writing programs. I feel like I'm playing video game, right? Because you're like from inside the program, you're building something, and you can always check on things. You can always like, what is my thing? And then like it feels like you're literally playing a video game. Like to achieve certain goals, you have to go like through levels. And now I'm like doing this, and now I'm doing this. And these days with LLMs, it even becomes like real, like you playing with the computer to achieve certain goals. And it's like now you're like, if before you were kind of in competitive mode, now you're in co-op mode, trying to achieve like, feels like playing a video game.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Really, I love it. I just love it. And people like, oh, it's dynamic. Like you have to like use like systems with like the strong type, static type. And I agree to certain like sentiments about like types, but like a lot of times people don't like look into the underlying type system that Clojure provides, like the Clojure spec, and things are like there's a lot of research done in Lisp community specifically towards like type systems, right? And people don't know, like if you're not involved in Lisp community, you don't even know that the research that's done like for towards the improving types. There's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Were you able to use Clojure or Clojure script in a professional capacity at the time, or you had to fall back to something else for the kids?
No, I was lucky. I found like a job relatively quickly, and when I came and I started, and my manager said, "Do you know any Ruby?" And I was like, "Yes, but I don't want to write any Ruby. I like Ruby, but this is not why I'm here." I'm like, "No, I'm just asking." And I was like, "No, I know Ruby, but I really want to do Clojure." And they put me on a Clojure project, and it was like first professional kind of Lisp environment, and nobody told me that Lisp-driven development doesn't mean that you have to type in the REPL, like REPL-driven development. I was like, for months, I was typing directly in the REPL until somebody told me, "Oh, like this is not the way how you do it. Like most typically, you don't even see the REPL." Today, we're developing with the REPL sitting in the Kubernetes cluster, like on some like remote computer, and we connect to it, and that's fascinating how we can do this, change the software like running. And we are like, as a group, we like sometimes we like do more programming, working on the same like building, like connecting to the running software and changing it from the inside. That's just like a very different way of solving computational problems that I ever knew before.
And that's a shared REPL, if I understand correctly, like for the whole team, not in each individual.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Like everybody in the team can connect to the same running app, and we together we like sometimes we break it, sometimes we like but it's not like running in production, but it's like simulating the production environment, and we can change it freely. We can we can test things, and it's interesting. Yes, of course, it has its own like cons and pros, like everything, but it's still such a different kind of mindset and different way of thinking about solving problems. I feel like all these years preceding like learning Lisp, and that's like how Emacs kind of opened like the whole world for me, the world of Lisp. I feel like I was not like the same programmer before Lisp, and Lisp made me. And today, the other benefit of Lisp that I found, that I can pretty much switch platforms with virtually zero overhead. Today, if I need to switch between, I can freely switch between Lua, JavaScript, JVM, .NET, Flutter, like any platform, you can name it, and there's probably Lisp for it. And switching between Lisp, different like dialects of Lisp, yes, there is like differences, but it doesn't feel like, I don't feel the hurdle. Like every time I go like from Python to Lua, or from Java, and we have to use like Go, like we have projects in Golang, in C#, in Java. We have a big team, and sometimes you have to look into the code base in different languages. And I always feel this this mental friction, because there's a syntax, there's lots of things that can go wrong, like, and you have to know like not only good parts of the language but also bad parts of the language. And there are like Lisp transpilers and compilers that pretty much for any platform. And if I can, I will always go for Lisp. Even sometimes I need to write like certain thing and I'm not allowed to use Lisp, I would prototype it in Lisp. It's faster for me, even if I have to rewrite it manually again. I mean, like these days, I don't probably have to do it manually. I probably can like figure out the algorithm, test it out quickly, and then say like, oh, like LLM, can you please help me to like, you know, rewrite it in whatever language I need it to be.
Yeah. I imagine now, of course, jokingly, you filing a complaint like, hey, your programming language doesn't have enough parentheses. What's going on there?
Well, it's surprisingly, a lot of like languages have more parentheses than actually Lisp has. It's just the perception, like, you know, when they're like put like in a way that people say like parentheses and nothing. I don't see parentheses anymore, to be honest. I like when I see parentheses, it's like you can't compare it. I was just thinking the other day, it's like a lot of small like pods that you have to like, or like containers that have like handles, like, you know, and you can move them freely. And other languages, they promise you like Lego blocks, but they become like a mess, right? Like, and you can't even like move things around. With Lisp, you just like, this is like, I can grab it, I can move it, I can, you know, barf this thing in, I can slurp this, like barf this thing out, like slurp this thing in, transpose things. It just becomes like a real, like, I feel like writing Lisp programs, to me, like it's like composing haikus. You kind of like get like, it feels like poetry, right? Like to a certain degree, it's just beautiful. It's totally different from the way how you even think about like certain problems. You kind of naturally get like, oh, I want to simplify this. Oh, I want this to make some smaller. I want this to be in a function. I want this to be like free of side effects if I can do this. I want this to be like, you know, more immutable. And that kind of like the all together, it kind of brings you to a certain like place where it's easier for you to reason about your program. It's easier about reasoning about the problem itself. It's not necessarily easier to talk about the problem to other people because Lisp can be cryptic until like, you know, somebody explains to you specific pieces of Lisp. It's hard to like, you know, and I get why people complain about it. And I tell them like, don't stare a piece of Lisp and try to understand it, because Lisp is not Lisp is a living, breathing thing. You have to get like connected REPL and try to understand it with the REPL. Like you need to be able to say, because like there's no ceremony. You don't have to do like anything special. You can like look at it and say like, I want to try this. What this means? Like tell me, right? Like I want to expand this macro. Tell me what like this becomes. And yes, REPL tells you, and you're like, oh, now I see it. Now I understand what this is about. Like, you know, and a lot of times it doesn't come like true, like just blindly staring at code. And a lot of people like see code as not like malleable, like living, breathing organism. They look at it like some static set of instructions the computer has to do at some point of time, right? Like, you know, and this perspective, the kind of changes when, and it's hard to explain, like I said, until you actually like experience that. It's really difficult to explain what it means to, right? Like there's also a good talk by Jack Crusher. It's called the title "Stop Writing Dead Programs." It's a really good talk, and he talks about like, you know, how you don't want to need to wait for compiler, linter, all these things, you know. And it's fascinating how in Emacs I can like probably start vanilla instance of Emacs and reintroduce my entire config, like recreate it from scratch in a new instance without ever not only restarting that instance, I don't even have to save anything anywhere, right? Like I can just get a scratch buffer. I mean, like in theory, it's possible. I just like, in practice, nobody's going to do that, but it's possible. Just like this, whenever I look at the like Emacs and I say like, well, like how can anybody who like opened this Pandora's box, who like got like access to this kind of power, how can you say no to this? Like, because I don't think there's any piece of like popular software in existence that you can do that easily, right? Like replicate things, change all the aspects. I can basically control my entire computer from a single instance of Emacs, and not just my computer, all the computers that like I can access to, right? Like I can manage all my digital life inside of instance of Emacs, and without ever having to restart it, without ever like even, you know, uh, just through the REPL, and that's fascinating.
Yeah. What do you think is the most difficult part about the Lisp language? Of course, beside the parentheses, because I think people can get used to those.
The most difficult part, I mean, like they're not even prerequisites, right? Like I always say, like, hey, if you new to Lisp and you want to, if you're interested in learning Lisp, figure out two things. Figure out like structural editing, like being able to move things around, because I mean, when you look at things and from the plain, like again, just like static code, you start feeling like, oh, how do I deal with these things? But if your editor has, and most editors have, like plugins to deal with structural editing, and structural editing by itself, it's, if you figure out like the patterns, it's actually very helpful in other languages that are not homoiconic. There are lots of patterns you can see, and lots of languages, they have certain like syntactic patterns. Like the tree-sitter is a good example, right? Like when you see like tree-sitter understands the structure of the code, you can have the tools, and if you don't have the tools, it's kind of it's really gets like really difficult. Once you figure out like structural editing, and then the next step is REPL driven development. And REPL driven, a lot of people, when they say REPL, they imagine like something like Python REPL, without even realizing every single step there has like differences. In Lisp, read is different, eval is different, print and loop, they all have like little differences, and those differences make like a huge difference in the experience of writing software. Because when you can like send anything with no like preceding ceremony, with no like without like jumping through hoops, like immediately see the results, it changes the way how you think about software. It changes the way how you think about the problem. It changes the way how you do the computing, how you solve problems, and how you manage your digital life. It's just different. I mean, like it may not be necessarily better or technologically superior. It's just different, right? And like like I said, almost transformative, right? Like if I or anybody can like gain a way to see in infrared light, right? Like if you like suddenly start like seeing things in infrared light, it doesn't necessarily make you better at things. It may bring like certain like problems, right? But at the same time, you gain powers, certain powers that like that is not like accessible to like most other human beings, right? Similarly, it just feels like you gain certain things, but you lose certain things also. But what I gained is like from getting into Lisp and Lisp world, I've opened like so many possibilities for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Just
And at the level of Emacs, of course, you get a certain kind of consistency among all the Lisps and more generally among how you interface with text and with your computer. Like there are some paradigms, some approaches which are predictable or the same. And so your config scales to match your needs, as it were, your evolving needs.
Yes, I mean, I I stopped. A lot of people like think about the Emacs configuration. Uh, Sometimes I see comments about like, oh, my config is I think I like it's getting unwieldy. Has a lot of parts that I don't fully understand. I want to rebuild it. I want to like start over. I think it's gotten to the state. I kind of stopped thinking about my config. I feel uh, my approach to like not just eLisp config, my Emacs configuration, my Emacs, but in general, Lisp programs, I feel like they can be grown as gardens, and gardens can be beautiful. They can have like yield like the fruits of your labor all the time, or they also can have dark corners, the corners you don't want to like often go, like sometimes you avoid like taking like looking at them. I kind of feel like my config is like that. I stopped fetishizing about it. I stopped like it's modular enough. I can find things in it. That's enough for me. Sometimes I've like I found like at least a couple of times when I needed a function right there right now, right, and I was like, and I like a command, I would write it, and then after a while, I would find that, oh, I already did this some years ago, and I had it. It's just another part of my config, and I would compare them. Oh, like this one's better. I'm just like, I today I write Lisp just like whenever I have a problem, I just need to like solve it, and it comes easily. I start writing Lisp in a Scratch buffer. I would experiment. If the problem's small enough, I would just like I solve it, move on. Sometimes it's a bigger problem and needs like some marinating. I would just create a to-do item in my notes and move on again until like I get annoyed. I like semi jokingly say the way how you learn Emacs, it's the speed of learning Emacs is proportionate to the amount of annoyance you gain, right? Like you get to be annoyed. You have to be annoyed by small things, right? Like it can be anything, right? Like for example, one day I was annoyed that having to switch to browser, copy the link, paste it back, and then like oh, I'm in Markdown, I have to turn it into Markdown like link, or like I'm in a work mode, it has to be work mode. Now I have to bring I was like, why am I doing this? I can do this perfectly. Like this is a solved problem. I should not think about it. It's can like small things like that, and it brings immense joy. Today I can just grab like not just the URL from my browser. I can grab the entire content of the page if I need to search for like specific text in it, like ignoring banners, like all these like things, animations, the fonts that like really difficult to read. I don't care about, like if I need like precise piece of text from a page, and if it doesn't matter, I just like this like I'm surprised how like for how many years I've done like my computing without like these small things that make your entire like day a little bit better, right? Like when I need to like send something to my colleague, right, I give them like precise things with like precise description. I don't give them like just like cryptic Jira ticket number or cryptic like URL to some PR on GitHub. It gives them like exact piece of code, like where is it pointing, what kind of like a function that is, and it takes me not even a second, right? Like it's just by like pressing like a couple of buttons, and it's there. It helps them. Emacs is actually helping not just me, my entire team to be better. And I think we can be better humans, better, better teammates. Like I said, we are not trying to solve like just technological problems, but socio-technological problems. We need to understand that we need to work together. We work together, and when we work together, like some little respect for your teammates, for the people who would be like looking at things. And Emacs can do this, and you can. It's most importantly, it's like gives you all the tools to do it simply, without like very like thinking, oh, like how do I solve it? Do I need to write like a Python script? Like, is it like, can I like, should I go into Bash? Like, do I need to read like, learn awk now and things like that? Like, you can do things, and it gives you all the tools. And when Emacs has like no reaching power, like for certain things, you can always delegate things, right? Like, I do my screenshots with Emacs, even though Emacs does have no business of doing screenshots. It just delegates the task to the specialized app, and I can extract that information for my needs. And Emacs kind of like a converging point. It just like a glue. Everything goes through Emacs, and that's just beautiful. Because everything, like, there's a lot of text, and the value of plain text is absolutely people like ignore the value of plain text. It's immense, especially today with LLMs, right? Like now we can textualize anything. Like image can be explained in a text, a video can be like explained in a text, even like video that doesn't have transcription or like any words. Like LLM can decipher it, explain to you, and you can have like, get the text out of like things that we did not expect to be textual. And we have enormous amount of text, like we gathered as humanity, we gathered enormous corpus of text, and like it's getting even like more difficult and difficult to work with that text. And Emacs is just the king. I think I see the possibilities of working with text in Emacs. And even today, they are like, wow, even at the age when you say like, we need to think differently about things because the world is changing. The world of computing is changing. And Emacs is more relevant than ever.
Yeah, I want to get into AI because you have mentioned it a couple of times, LLMs. But just to say that what you are now describing is also made possible because of your mindset of tackling a problem via some Lisp. Like you see a problem, you're like, okay, let me streamline this, automate this, or figure this out by writing some Lisp. And then, of course, it's there. So all future problems have been solved as well.
I'm not sure I got.
So like you say, for example, my colleague needs this link, but I won't just give them a link. I will also give them the description, and there will be a relevant information there. So I imagine you have written some Emacs Lisp command or some function which takes some input and then produces a relevant format for your colleague to have a better experience and for you not to have to write that all the time manually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like there are a lot of times. So going back to the LLMs, right? I just recently I realized how like there are a lot of LLM criticism, right? Like I don't feel like the vibe coding is the thing because you shouldn't be vibe coding. Like to me, it sounds like drunk driving. To be honest, it's like the vibe coding. It's you like letting any automated system to write code for you. It's like a good idea to a certain degree. You still have to like, you're responsible for that code. You still like, either you get paid or like, creating free software and putting it, like you are still responsible. You bear responsibility, not like LLM, not the AI agents, not like, the tools you use. Emacs is not responsible for the crappy code I write. I can write crappy code in any IDE, right? Like I'm capable of writing crappy code without Emacs. But like the responsibility stays with me. What I found in like the use of LLMs in Emacs lately, that it's good for certain things that I can, like, you can see them as like kind of glorified macros, right? Like the keyboard macros. I mean, like when I needed to solve this specific problem, when I needed to like refactor code in a way that basically makes the rewriting the code, and I said to myself, oh, like maybe I can do it with macro, right? Like, move down like here and like, figure out like very complex macro. And Emacs is very good at creating very complex macros where you have like logic in your macros, where you have like loops in your macros, because keyboard macros in Emacs, they translate into programs. You can extract the Lisp code underneath that's like, and like make it into a function, which is fascinating by itself. But with LLMs, I can say like, I have this problem. Can you like write like a Lisp function that does it for me? And I do this, like I solve this problem, and it's throwaway code. I don't care about like how beautiful it is, how optimized it is. It's like, it might be crappy, but it does the job, and I can't forget about it. Like that's, I feel like sometimes I'm finding more and more problems like that, and sometimes it becomes a kind of a thing. I mean, like the example we're using, like when I'm sharing something with my colleague. So for example, I am going through Python code, and there's a function, right? Like today, if I need to share the specific piece, it's like Python Clojure, whatever code it is, if I'm at the header of the function and the function has like special signature, it has the name, I can extract the name, fully qualified name of this function, like, where it sits, what it means, with like, and put it in a link that collects the link for specific SHA or specific, like, and it's specific link to specific line in specific code on GitHub. It extracts that information like easily, and with just it, like, it's a solved problem for me. I just go like, whenever I need like anything like Emacs is good at contextual understanding things, right? Like when I type something like RFC 3495, Emacs knows, my Emacs knows that this is RFC number. It's not just piece of text that like gibberish, right? Like it knows that this is RFC, and I can explore that RFC like without like losing context, without switching context, without losing my focus. I can quickly like look at the things like at the RFC document in place, while like in the midst of typing a message. They can happen, or like a Jira ticket. I can extract the information about like specific Jira. And Jira ticket, I'm just like, today my company, they want us to use Jira. Some like, tomorrow they may change their minds. They like, switch to a different system. Like, or I change jobs and they not using Jira, for example, they may be using Asana or something. It doesn't matter to me, because I can extract that information, because I will do that. Like the first thing I would say, like, I'm not gonna go open a page, search on it, then find on the page, then click another link, then tap again, then wait again, and then like to extract a piece of text that that's just makes no sense.
Yeah, I like this approach. How do you interface with an LLM? How do you do it from inside Emacs, I imagine?
I'm afraid my LLM game is not, is still kind of behind, because a lot of problems I'm trying to solve today, they're maybe not like very good for solving. With LLMs are good. I tried like different things, but like we don't use like one specific project. We do inter-project things. There are lots of times you have to understand it's just like too much context to feed into one LLM. Like kind of it's hard to like deal with these kind of problems. That's why I've like stayed away from LLM, but I started using it for I used GPTel. I used what was the one of the first packages for Zenodium made it. It's chat. I
GPT
forgot the
Shell, I
name of them.
think.
GPT Shell, Chat GPT Shell. I used that in the beginning. Then Karthik made GPTel. I swayed to try it, and I was like fascinated how extendable it is, how like easy to understand what's happening, and I've been using it since, to deal with like plain text mostly. A lot of times, like especially these days, when people like ask, what language do you mostly use? And I said, these days it's plain English, or like most of the time I have to deal with YAML, right? Not even programming languages. So like when dealing with text, a lot of times I need to restructure it. I need to like check I have like certain prompts, and it's very helping, especially for somebody like me. English is not like my second, it's not even third language. It's and English for a long time it's been hard for me. I'm trying to learn Spanish right now, and Emacs also helps me to learn language in a specific way that is very interesting. Maybe like it's a case like nobody even thinks about, but the way how Emacs helps me, it's just very interesting.
Yeah, I see. But basically, your LLM usage in Emacs is for everyday problems and not for the big work-related kind of tasks.
Right. I still need to figure out like I haven't like used the tools with GPTel or connected to MCP servers. I need to figure out like I need to up my game with LLMs, because I mean like there are lots of criticism. I see a lot of criticism from folks, and I understand this, but like we cannot uninvent the thing.
No.
It's there, it's here, it actually works. And I mean like we can think of the possibilities, or like the future, or like we can stay but the tool is a tool. I mean like you can use it, or you decide not to use it, but I mean like at least you have to try. And for certain like tasks, LLMs are really, I mean like they're not I mean like let's be honest, they're not going to solve, like they're not going to replace the programmers anytime soon. I mean like they may replace certain type of programmers, because the programming is a spectrum, right? Like there are lots of problems that you can, I mean like somebody writing like complex macros in Excel, they can say like I've been programming Excel, and they would be like maybe to a degree right. Might not be the programming that you like understand in traditional sense, and some people always scoff like, like that's not programming, but it still might be a programming, right? Like so there's a spectrum of like certain tasks, and like sure, yeah, for certain tasks maybe AI will do things better than certain like kind of programming jobs, but like largely the relevance, the computer science basics, they stay the same. We like we still need to know data structures, we still need to understand like certain algorithms, because LLMs can solve a lot of problems. Like 90% of problems that we deal with, they don't like non-deterministic, they don't like require specific, they can't like there's like inaccuracy involved, and it's the most of the world is not like precise and accurate, right? Like most of the problems we solve, they don't have to be like mathematically provable things, right? Like and but we still have a bunch of things, tons of things that we need determinism for. We need them to be provable. We need like precision, right? Like LLMs can create you recipe for like they cannot replicate the same burrito over and over again, right? Like they can create you like million ways of like doing like million beautiful burritos, but recreating it like in a way that is reproducible and exact, that's probably not the thing that you would use LLMs for. And for that kind of problems, I think we have tons of them still, and that is still remains like requirement for people of in my profession.
So do you think that much of the criticism against LLMs is really a criticism of the users of LLMs rather than the technology itself?
Well, it's like it's multifaceted, right? Like you can't, like many things in life, most things in life, they're like it's multifaceted thing. You can't. There's the morality of the things. There is like the corporate involvement in greed and capitalism, which is like on to the topic on itself. There's like technological hurdles, right? Like the AI as we know it, it's very weird, right? Like for something like 70 years, we like, if I remember right, like somebody said like, oh, the natural language process NLP is basically a solved problem. We just need like 5 to 7 months or something like that, right? Like they said like back in the 70s or 60s, and then like that turned out to be a problem that like they couldn't solve for 70 years. It's like it was like stagnated. And then suddenly, what was it, like 2022, 2020, 2021, when the GPT came out, and it was like, oh, like, and now I think we're still seeing again that the plateauing on this thing. But it opens like a lot of the like arguments and a lot of discussions about what is it, what, like, is this like can we do this? Does knowing language well has anything to do with conscience, right? Like, can AI feel the pain, right? Like, if AI can feel the pain, what pain means for AI model, right? Like, does like maybe they can feel pain like at some point in the future, and that would be like it means if they can feel pain, can they feel like frustration? Like when LLM says like, I'm so sorry, like, I made a mistake, you're absolutely right. It's not feeling, it's like it's saying like things. Is our emotional kind of state with like when working with LLM translates to that? Like there are so many questions that like, from your philosopher, you probably can like dive and it become like, endless discussion, very interesting discussion. But I don't know. I mean, like, I like many people, I don't know, like even what kind of questions to like, to ask about this thing, because we don't even know where the answers may lead us. But it's absolutely opening like absolutely interesting world of possibilities, and I think it's going to be fascinating. I feel very optimistic for the world of future. We'll see.
Yeah, and it's what you said earlier. Like you cannot just go back and uninvent it. Like it's here, and we just have to figure things out as we go. And I think nobody really knows where we are heading towards in terms of all the open questions, whether it's on the technology front, the economy front, the politics front, the philosophy front, science, so on. I think there are so many open threads there. And part of it is, of course, we proceed one step at a time with open-mindedness, but a healthy dose of skepticism as well. Like, if you are, of course, just promoting the hype, then of course I can see why you would be criticized for that. But if you are like, hey, there is a technical case to be made, here it is, it works. Now let's see if there is a business case. Now let's see if there is a social case, and so on and so forth. I think that's a more constructive approach, ultimately. It's not like, oh, I just don't like it, let's close the story now.
Yes, Yes, I think, I mean, like, specifically, I think, like, first of all, as the computer professional, as a, like, somebody, as a programmer, I think it's like, it's also, like, to a certain degree, my involvement is also important. Everybody's involvement is important. We need to start, like, we need to keep talking about it. We need to bring, like, the issues. We need to, like, the arguments, because a lot of people, they don't understand that. They don't even understand the basics of, like, how these models work. we
Mm.
we need to at least, like, have, like, certain degree of involvement. We should not be saying, like, oh, like, I don't want to deal with that any, like, it's the whatever criticism is there. We still need to understand ourselves, the tools well enough, to the point that, because these tools will drastically change our lives. I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson said, look at the pictures of New York in 1920s, right? And then look, like, just Google images, like, find New York in 1930s. Just 10 years, in 10 years, no horses. Everything replaced by cars in just 10 years. We're moving at, like, even faster pace now. Like, we don't know what happens in 5 years time, how this technology changes. Just like, it fascinates me, the things we can build with it, like, the things we could do with it. At the same time, it could be scary, but we need to know the limits. We need to know, like, and we need to keep. What I don't like from, like, especially, like, free and open source software, like, movements, that people, there's a lot of criticism, and instead of, like, criticizing it blindly, we should be able to say, like, hey, we need to have free and open source alternatives to the paid versions. Because, in my opinion, the free software always, in the long run, it's always more beneficial for the society, for the use, for the, even when the, because I've seen over the years how, like, the company, they start with a free tier, right? Like, and they start, like, squeezing, and it's not just about money, but it also the freedoms, the computational freedoms you get, right? I don't like software that, I hate Zoom, because they keep adding, like, features that, like, maybe marketable, but they're not important to me. Like, I need, like, accessibility options. I need to be able to, like, do things with my keyboard without touching mouse. And there are a lot of people with, like, certain, like, limitations, like, they have to use, like, certain, like, accessibility options, and they can't even say anything, because for, like corporate Zoom, it's not like market, like, for them it's just a market share, like, of 0% of people, like, they, if they can use a software, like, be it, right? Like, and that's not right. We should be able to use software as we want, how we want, and, like, in a controllable way, in the way how we want to interact it. Like, if it's running on my computer, it's up to me, not to anybody else to tell me how I, like, you're holding it wrong doesn't sit well with me. It will never sit well with me. If I'm holding, I mean, like, if you're not letting me hold it, like, the way I want to hold it, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'll, like, rather find, like, free alternatives,
Uh-huh.
right? Even though it may not be, like, have, like, the same features, man, like, in the long run, it always wins.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's very good. Um, Tell me a little bit, because you mentioned earlier how building software is also a social activity. There's this societal aspect to it. Tell me a little bit about this more in general, and then in particular in the context of the LLM revolution, let's say. Like, how does that change the dynamic in the teams that you are working in, if it does?
So, you see, for a long time, I liked dealing with computers, even when I got into computers because I wasn't very social kid. I prefer to stay with, like, staring at my computer screen. And at the time, there were, like, very crappy screens that, like, and like my eyes would always bleed, like, from staring at this, like, the CRT screens of, like. But I preferred that than playing with kids, because I was kind of a little not very social, and I chose to work with computers because of that aspect. It took me years, decades, to learn that computers are mostly is about people. It's not about technology. It's not about, like, connecting computers. It's about connecting people together. uh, because from, like, as species, we become, uh, we we're not, like, better than, we weren't better than our other competing, species on the planet, right? Like, we had, like, even in Homo family of species, we won out, not because we were stronger or even smarter. We had, like, bigger brains, or we had, like, better stamina. We won simply because of our ability to tell stories to each other, right? Like, we are, like, the way I was just sitting the other day. We were having a birthday party, and we were sitting together, and I realized, oh my God, this is what makes us humans. This is, like, chimps don't sit around together and share a meal and tell stories to each other, right? Like, they don't, like, it's us that what this is what us, like, we tell stories to each other. And programming, to a degree, it's telling stories, right? Like, you have to understand, like, in Java you can tell, like, stories about, like, certain things in a certain way. In Lisp you can tell stories in a different way, but there still can be fascinating stories. When you see it, like, as stories, and stories, we need to move people, right? Like sometimes the story is so interesting. Like, a lot of people, like, today, they live according the story that may have happened 2,000 years ago. It may have not happened, but it's still a fascinating story, right? Is it true, or, like, or it happened or not? It's like, it's a different, like, argument, but it's a fascinating story. And we build things together, like, by telling stories. And, it turns out, like, LLMs can also tell stories. But that's brings an interesting thought. If there are no people behind the stories, are they still relevant? Are they still, like, if the only computer is telling stories to each other, right? We write code not for the computers. Computers don't care in what, like, they don't care in what languages we use. Like, do we use Lisp or Haskell or whatever, or Java? They don't care, right? Like, we care about computer programs. And do at some point we stop caring because computers don't care about computer languages? It's that there are, like, lots of interesting things. Languages are fascinating, just like human languages. And the programming languages are also human inventions, right? Like, every language, it tells a story. I am fascinated by just etymology of words, right? Like, that's why I built, like, one of the things, I at some point I said, like, oh, I'm looking at dictionary entries all the time. I want to have this in Emacs. So I, like, I see the word, I want to see the dictionary entry for this specific word, because etymology of words is interesting. Like, when you look at the things, like, from regular perspective, like, just, like, take one aspect, the atmospheric levels, right? Like, there's a troposphere, like, stratosphere, and then thermo. Thermo is a Greek word. You're very familiar. Thermo means hot. And, like, why does it, and then you look, why is it thermosphere? Because the temperatures reach, like, if I remember right, like, some enormous, like, 4,500 Celsius, right? Wow. Centigrade. It's very hot. We're, like, basically, like, in a hot ball, like, going through space very fast. And, like, the curiosity about words can get you there. Like, you can see just how words change. And, like, similarly, when you look at the programming languages, like, there's certain history about, like, every single reserved word or like a name of the function, right? Like there's certain etymology of things, like why we call it Git. But like, there's some interesting story why Linus wanted to call it Git, right? It's a fascinating world, and if you just keep like the inner curiosity for why things are that way, it kind of like it becomes interesting world, but it's changing. I admit it's changing, and I'm not sure like where we're going with this. Are we still telling stories? Our stories are relevant. When I started writing better with LLMs, with help of LLM, I actually practice my Spanish with LLM because it's easier. With like ChatGPT has this advanced voice thing. You can argue with it, and you can argue, and you can tell it like, hey, can you explain this in Spanish? I don't understand this. Can you explain this in English? Something you can't do with other people. You can do with LLM. You can trust it. I mean, like, it's even dangerous because a lot of people now use them as the therapy advisors, right? Like, for medical advisory and stuff. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know how it works, if it even works well, but some people do that, and I don't know. There are lots of interesting possibilities, but also the things we only understand like maybe years later.
Yeah, correct. Interestingly, of course, etymology and the narrative spinning also go together. For example, you mentioned earlier Pandora's box. So, of course, Pandora, the word literally means all gifts. So, of course, it's the box that contains all the gifts. But the gifts, of course, are not necessarily benign to you. They can be detrimental. So, of course, now just by telling you Pandora, I'm now telling you a story already of, well, here is everything, and some will be nice, some will not be so nice.
Right, and it's like it wasn't even a box. I think it was a jar, and I mean, like we say it a box, but I don't think Greeks had boxes.
Yeah,
But
it's a vessel, whatever.
yeah, it's like the mythology, especially Greek mythology, is fascinating because it's the way how things are. Like, again, like we have the stories, right? Like in the storytelling, and the storytelling changes all the time, right? The way that, and technology helps us because it's all about storytelling. We are fascinated by the storytelling since we started we started like telling stories. Like, we fascinated by stories of Homer, like, who, or Socrates, who never like written anything. He was against of writing anything, right? But we still fascinated by stories that were like written like far later. And these stories are changing, and every time, like, new technology, radio changed the way how we told stories. Then television changed the way how we tell stories, and we were like, oh, now, like, this is wrong, we should not be telling stories like that, right? Like, every time we like new technology came out, there was some pushback against it, because we like our stories, we like our storytelling. We don't like when, like, somebody mingles with our storytelling, because the way how we tell stories, the way we live our lives. And sometimes, like, somebody else telling the different story, like, they're like, like, this is I don't like this is the enemy, right? Like, but if you often listen to stories and try to understand them, and it may open like very fascinating different like stories on itself.
And I think that's what Socrates understood and was against writings, because think about it this way. Now I am imagining Socrates saying, my friend, if I write it down, you will be paying attention to each word and will be like, what did Socrates actually mean with this comma over here, right? Whereas what I want you to do is think of the story, think of the narrative, what I am saying, and you will think about it again, and it will be slightly different than before, but it doesn't really matter, because the point is for you to be in the mode of thinking and ultimately in the mode of thinking for yourself. And then, of course, through discourse, as you have said, like language and storytelling, and us sitting at the table and telling stories to each other, we reach some interpretation that makes sense and is useful, and we live our lives accordingly.
Yeah, it's very relevant. The Socrates, and it's probably very relevant. If Socrates was alive and he saw me like using LLMs, he would be like flipping tables and like, like this is not what I thought. This is not like this is wrong. I don't know. Maybe he would be fascinated
I
by
think he
that.
would be interested, yeah, because
Yeah.
there is this part which is the indeterminate part, right? So it's not deterministic. So of course it's important what you are working towards, and that's the part of it which is the tool. Like, and also in the context of therapy that you said, or all these other applications, like, what are your expectations? What do you expect to get out of it? If you expect to get out of it basically gospel, like something that you will never question, then probably that's not a good use case. But if you are approaching it in a more dialogue like way, where it's like, okay, tell me something and I will think about it and I will tell you something back, and we have this ping pong of ideas, then maybe that's constructive no matter what you do with it. Maybe.
Right. You bring interesting point. We need to keep asking questions. That's what like defines us, like, again, as humans. What they say, like, other they recently they found out that parrots are also possibly can ask questions, like real questions. I mean, like, I don't know to what degree, but like we are defined by our abilities to think about things and questioning things, and we always need to question, right? Like, no matter what the authority is, either like, even I totally assume that at some point there will be sects that will be looking at the AI agents as like certain deities. They will be like, this is the thing, this is right, because like, whatever this thing said, we need to follow it, because like, they will find compelling arguments. I'm pretty sure like they will, that it may be like certain things like that in works, like, some people, they will always be like certain aspect, again, because we get fascinated by the stories. If you put the story right in the right like packaging, that story can sell, right? And like, if you sell the story, then if people buy it, there will be like, the basic like supply and demand, like economics, and they may work. And like, we may say like, oh, this is so like bad, but it like, it's what us makes us humans, right? Like, we have different like stories that fascinate us differently.
Yeah, and it's ultimately not a question of, well, is this bad or is this good in a vacuum, but in the context of our exchanges with the technology, but also our exchanges between ourselves, like the people. Like, eventually, how does a piece of information get disseminated among us?
Right, right, right.
And that is not clear, like the technology does not foreshadow that. Maybe it does influence it, but it doesn't determine it.
Right. I I am very optimistic about like the technology and the technology movement, because I mean, I see that uh, sometimes, like, there are times where smart geniuses, they can be very uh, like, again, can say bad, but do certain things in a way that like, hurts humanity, hurts like people, hurts groups of people. And we seen it over and over, like, like, we can bring the examples how Facebook basically created like massacres and human genocide, made like inadvertently or advertently. It's like, it's a different discussion, but like, technology made possibilities of that. And yes, I think it will be always possible, but at the same time, the majority of the people in technology, inventors, scientists, they most of the plethora of people, they do it for good. They do it because they want to do with good intentions. They want to like better things for them, for for the society. And I'm very optimistic that the technology, it's technology and science, they're like self-regulating mechanisms, right? Like things that that not relevant, they become irrelevant like naturally. I mean, in our short-lived industry, it's kind of hard to see, but like Emacs is a good example. Emacs and Vim, they've stayed relevant for so long. And even today, you would look at things and like with the perspective, you can see how like things like changing in VS Code. VS Code is fascinating piece of software. I mean, like I admit it, in like 5-year timeline, they've reached like goals that was really difficult. I mean, like if you put like a lot of money into making like good piece of software, it like may happen, and it's really good piece of software for what it does, right? But at the same time, it did not, like, no matter how much money, how much effort, how many millions, how many like work hours they put on it, it's not gonna kill Emacs and Vim, because Vim and Emacs, they've seen over and over and over like these different like new ways of doing things, and they stayed relevant because there's a good plethora of corpus of like good people behind it who like intentionally put their lives, they make it their lives, parts of their lives, that to bring the goodness in technology, right, for humans. And like it's fascinating how this world, it's like we are able to keep that, like the world of computing, and like for so long, and it's just like keep reigniting itself every time. Like we'll look at us like, oh, like yes, Emacs is outdated because it has like old, like like things are like very old, and like these like, and then suddenly somebody makes some breakthrough, they change something, they add certain like an LSP, right, like addition was like, wow, like this is like entire like game changer. And it happens like often enough. I think it's very fascinating world how it still remains relevant.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe part of that relevance is if you think of Emacs as an organism, which is a strange way of thinking of it, but if you think of it that way, it's adaptability, one thing, and then if you think of the community of Emacs, so free software community, as an organism, again, it's adaptability. Like basically, we have LLMs, and then there is Alvaro Ramirez, so Zinodium, and then Karthik Chimagalur. And they, all of a sudden, you have like 2, 3, 20, 50 packages on AI integration, LLMs, and suddenly Emacs is a cutting edge technology, even though
Right.
it would otherwise be kind of obsolete, out of date sort of thing. And all because the software is adaptable, the community is adaptable, and we just keep going.
Right. It's interesting when like when the question to the answer to the question, can Emacs do this, it's almost invariably yes. And if Emacs cannot do this today, it's only because nobody bothered to build this thing to do through Emacs, right? And that's basically what it is. In like a lot of times you go in there and like, I want to do this, and like you don't find answers, and like well, like maybe I can build it, and um, to solve my personal problem, and then it becomes a thing, and and suddenly it's there. It's like Emacs does that, and just like yeah, we do it.
Yeah, yeah. One of the questions I get from time to time in private exchanges as well is, "Hey, Prot, what would it take for you to switch away from Emacs?" And I'm like, well, it has to be a better Emacs. In other words, it has to learn from what Emacs is doing. It has to continue being an Emacs, but if it can do it better, whatever that means, well, I'm all for it. But
Yeah,
basically, there is
absolutely.
something there we kind of found, kind of like a truth, let's say, which is untouchable. Like you are not removing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not like, I'm not married to, I have like, how many? I just like something like, I don't even remember how many lines of eLisp I have right now. I can probably look it up, but again, I don't want to derail my own thought. So I have like tons of eLisp code in my config alone, and I'm not married to it. If like there's something better comes out, like better with like, but I just don't see it. I see there's possibilities. A LEM project is interesting, right? The community behind is interesting, but I'm not sure. It like I will it stay relevant 10 years from now? Because I'm sure like Emacs will stay relevant. My like the things I've done in Emacs Lisp. But if I see a better thing, there's also another project. I think it's called Easel. But it's in very early stages. It's in very alpha. I mean, like, there are certain interesting ideas around it, certain like things, but like we need to, like, it's always good to reinvent the wheel, right? Like, and I'm happy to see when people, there's a lot of in Rust community, they reinventing wheels all the time, like the Zig community reinventing wheels, Emacs community, and like the Nilvin community, they doing the same things, that like playing, like, sometimes I see like, oh, the kids are all right, like, some 16-year-old kid, and like, I've been trying, like, doing this thing, I rebuilt this thing because I just wanted to, like, play around, mess around with things, and I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. I like when, somebody says like, oh, I just want to build Lisp and Lisp just for the sake of it. I'm like, wow, this is great. I wish I had, like, the time and energy and like the same amount of curiosity to like reinvent the wheel, because reinventing wheels, it's hard. It's really hard. You have to go against the prejudice, against the, like, the you would say like, oh, for thousands of years we had wheels, right? For thousands of years they worked the same way, but like, what can I do differently? Like, maybe, and like suddenly you realize for thousands of years we were not like doing it optimistically for like this specific like problem. And it's fascinating that we still be able to find this today, on like, in our everyday lives, right? And these tools, the way how they change our mindsets about, like, don't, like, that's what I always say, don't settle with status quo, don't settle, like, how the way you do things, get annoyed by things, like small things. If you, like, you see that your window is like not right there, or like, something, like anything, any aspect of it, you should be annoyed by that, because it's your computer, you are a programmer. If you feel like you're programming and you want to be a programmer, and you, like, you should feel that you are controlling the computer. Computers should listen to you, not the other way around.
And I think that is at the heart of Emacs as a lifestyle. That's how I see it, where it's like, I want to be opinionated and not be apologetic about that. So I will be unapologetically opinionated. I want my window exactly this way. You do it.
Right,
That sort of
right.
thing.
I mean, sometimes you feel like this is so stupid, but like, if it works, maybe it's not that stupid, right? So I was dealing with this problem, right? Like, I'm learning Spanish, and I have Google Translate package that is, like, by itself is not like something unique. Every single editor probably has some like integration, like with Google Translate, or like translation service. Like, it's like not a big thing. But I would like put something like, he was born in 1984, right? And like, what Google Translate does, it doesn't translate the year, which is sensible, which is fine. But I'm learning the language. I need to see it exactly how it's like, it's gonna be 1900. It's like something at the right, and I needed to see in words. So what did I do? Did I need to go and like explore Google Translate API? No. Did I have to open the documentation? No. Like, what the only thing I had to do is to run like to toggle the profiler to see the execution path, like what functions getting called when I call the translation. I found that like what function is getting called. I looked at the signature. I said like, okay, before sending the payload to Google Translate, I want you to take this piece and like find the numbers and like translate numbers to words. I couldn't even find the implementation of that in Emacs Lisp. I didn't have time to write it in Emacs Lisp. What I found that there's an npm package for it, right? What I did, I called like npm package in like, and like check if it's installed, and if like and installs it, it basically calls the what was it? Shell command to string, right? And gives the like, and it basically does that. And it took me like very little effort to do this, advising the function. And I changed an aspect of my editor of like a third party package that I have no business in like dealing with, like exploring or rewriting. I didn't have to rewrite like any aspect of it, but I changed it like radically for my like for a specific problem. And that my everyday thing, right? Like, I see a thing, I have it, like, and Emacs just has all the tools to solve for like, this specific problem. And like, well, if it like, yeah, it does look stupid, but it works. Maybe it's not that stupid because it worked for me, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this, of course, speaks to what you said earlier, like interfacing through Emacs, like shell command to string with an npm package. It just works. Nothing to see here. It's good.
Right. Like, I see Emacs as like, IDEs give you a lot of like buttons and ways to do things, right? Like, or keyboarding, like keyboard, like shortcuts to do things. Emacs, instead of like pressing like buttons or opening menus in Emacs, you like interact with it like through Emacs Lisp, and then you have virtually unlimited number of buttons, because it gives you like virtually unlimited ways of solving your problems in a way that would be like very different in a different IDE. In like IDE, to solve like the problem I had before, I would have to write my own extension. I don't have time for that. I just needed like specific problem to solve, and it took me like, like 10 lines of code, and maybe like, a little more with like npm like shenanigans. And I didn't have to use npm. I could have used like Python package or whatever, right? Like, I just found like the first solution that worked for me, and I was like, it works, it's good enough, right? For the time being, until I learn the numbers, I keep it. Once I'm like, I'm familiar with numbers, maybe I'll like, when I start like learning Italian or something, or Portuguese, maybe like it comes back and I can reuse it. But until then, it's just like kind of like sometimes, like my father loves to say, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution.
Good. Yeah. And of course, it's also how you were saying earlier, like, oh, it's just a throwaway code. I don't really need to think about it too much. And I like this aspect of it because there is this complaint that I see from time to time, which is like, hey, I'm always working with my Emacs config. I should actually be doing stuff instead of just tinkering with Emacs Lisp. And I think maybe that is a matter of people trying to do the best thing they can ever design, instead of just having your kind of pragmatic approach, which is like, it works, let's move on to the next thing.
Right. I mean, Emacs is interesting because it's kind of it gives you the tools to you can see it as like virtually like boundless canvas, right? It gives you all the tools to mess around, and it's like it's pretty much, I think it's the essence of it. It's hard not like to mess around with, like, you've given a canvas to be creative, and it's hard not to mess around with it, right? And like wanting to do things in Emacs, I think it's natural, because that's like, like it's tool the build to mess around with, right? But I've gotten to the point where my messing around is not like tinkering. It's like sorting specific problems, right? I was just like the yesterday I was giving an example to someone online. So how I like just a few things I changed over the course of like the last few days, and I did certain things, and I like all of them. They're pretty much like to solve specific problem that I get paid to solve, right? Like I get paid to solve specific problems, and Emacs is just the tool that is helping me to solve that. I mean, I like sometimes I don't even have to put it in my config, right? Like I just do it in Scratch buffer. It works. I do it, and like yesterday I was trying to find all the so like this is like very specific, very like precise example, right? I needed to find all the repos that changed something to do with adding metadata. And we have like multiple GitHub organizations, and we have like multiple different like repositories, and I needed to have like repositories match a certain pattern, the name of repositories. So I needed to find I found like over 200 different repositories that matched the name, and I needed to find the specific commit that mentions, right? And I just like sit down and wrote like some code that is pretty much throwaway script, but it helped me to solve like one specific problem, and I moved on. I mean, like maybe I made it like generalized in a generalized way that it's like pretty much I can like reuse it again, right? And the same way I wrote like one of the recent packages, I think it's called GitHub Topics. And the reason I called it GitHub Topics, because I thought like I'm gonna add like more features to that. That's probably this script will become part of this package. So the reason I like wrote it in the first place, my colleague showed me a big Jira epic with like dozens of like subtasks, and I needed to find all the the relevant work related to these tickets, and like our Jira was not configured in a way that it leads to the specific, like there was no linking. So I had to go through, and I was like, I don't want to do it manually. Like if it takes me, more than an hour to write this thing, maybe I'll forget about it. But it didn't. It took me like 15 minutes to solve this specific problem. I wrote it and I said like, oh, I solved it. Maybe I'll make it into a package because it becomes like useful thing, right? Like, and now I have a package that in org mode, like it shows like you search for a specific thing on multiple orgs, and it shows you in org mode. Outline is just like, I can talk about org mode outline for like another hour, because it's so beautiful, it's so nice. It's like it's the simplicity of it, absolute simplicity of it is just chef's kiss. It's just amazing how like you can precisely, and like there's so many formats you can do in just like org mode outline. All the like your itineraries, your like planning, your to-dos, your like itemizing things, the comments. I read Hacker News and Reddit in Emacs in org mode because like I have all the instruments to find the sparse trees. Like anybody who uses sparse tree search, like if that thing doesn't fascinate you, how you do this, yes, I don't know how what else can fascinate you about different things. I'm like, the first time I saw how like sparse research, I was like, wow, this is very useful. Or like indirect buffers. That's another thing that fascinates. No other software does that. Like indirect buffers, where like I don't care. Like your buffer, like it's like not like file related kind of thing, right? Like this medium is for anything. You can have like your file structure. I can like build like it probably wouldn't take me long. I can build like my the file structure in org mode outline, right? And like it would be it's like this. It gets like so ridiculous sometimes. I was dealing with a huge YAML file, and I found that Emacs doesn't have like good way of sorting YAML files, and I needed to sort like some like certain like I think it was like a big GitHub action or something. You know what I did? I was like, the first rule from algorithm school, right? Like if you stuck, change your perspective. What I did, I changed the buffer into org mode, right? Org mode has like beautiful facilities to sort the outlines. I sorted YAML, switched back to YAML, and that worked. I'm like, wow, this is so stupid. I just can't even explain how stupid that is, but it worked. And I'm like why, like, it's like I think you naturally get to the point where like you don't even think about problems. Just Emacs has the tools. You just have to like sometimes like meta X and like explain your problem. And today you actually can. That like I had I was talking to Karthik, and he did that. He did just that. He did Emacs and started GPTL and said like, what was that like mode that lets you draw things? And it was like, oh, it's artist mode. It found it, and it did it. He did it in the context of the meta X pop-up, the vertical completion menu. I was like, wow, that is just bananas. Right.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I mean, but of course, this kind of intuition comes with some experience. So, of course, somebody just starting out with Emacs won't have the epiphany of, hey, let me quickly switch from YAML to org mode, do this transposition, and then switch back to YAML. But with experience, of course, that just makes sense.
Right. Like you build certain intuition around things. I mean, like, the EVV. I call it EVV. Like, let me call it EVV because I mean, like, I'm allowed to call it EVV because I'm like English is not my native language. It's like Emacs web browser. I like EWW. Like, it's amazing how like you can grab a thing in EVV and then turn the mode to a different thing, right? And it's like it just I do it all the time. I was like the first time I fascinated, like, oh, I can do this. I can like grab the raw log URL, like open it in EVV. Now I actually build like integration. Today I can open, like, jump from my browser back to Emacs, like open either the context of the page or the page, or it's just like, it's so beautiful. And like certain problems, just like, oh wow, like I had no idea that it just works. Sometimes you like, it's like, yeah, you build the intuition around things and you try things for the sake of trying. And like Emacs always like all the time, it surprises you. Sometimes you're just like, wow, you just did this? I mean, like, I had no idea. I had no idea this was possible. Or like you would go to find like something in their code in like, certain packaging, like you find like a certain line and like, oh, like I did not know that I could call this, and like, and now I have like my output all colored beautifully, right? Like, or things like that. It's like, it kind of like, yeah, this hacker's mindset that like virtually anything is possible. Like there are no limits to what you can do. You just have to have like some like inventiveness, some like, and curiosity. How can I do this better? Right? Like it just, you can like, you have to be annoyed by small inconsistencies in your workflow, and it changes to the way you see. A lot of times I think we have like a burnout kind of epidemic in our in our industry where people like just like stressed out, burned out, they just don't want to code anymore. And I think it comes from like this like repetitive like manual tasks that you have to like unknowingly you have to go like, oh, I have to open this and then wait for that and tap for this and then like, and now it's like it's so bureaucratic, it's so tiring. I like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to be in that like space. You can enjoy working with computers when like it's enormously joyful experience. It like so it's so dopamine inducing activity when something happens and you like and you wrote it, you did this, you told the computer that and it does it and you're like, wow, it worked. I'm just like, this is I'm like, I'm so glad. And every time I do like small thing like that, I'm like, I did this years ago and it works. And and sometimes when like it's packaged in a like in a thing and somebody says like, hey Ag, I've been using this thing, I just discovered this, and I'm like, I have questions about it, or like they just say like, thank you for writing this, and I'm like, oh, like I'm like, it made my day.
Yeah, that's very nice. And it also goes to what you said earlier of the like a video game, you said. So it's a game world, and if you are thinking of it in more playful terms, so that creativity, that playfulness, it brings a certain enthusiasm to it, which keeps you evergreen. You don't burn out, and you always find these solutions, and they bring you joy.
Absolutely. I mean, like, what's crazy about dealing with computer systems, with like software, that it's the activity that never feels like a job. Like if it ever becomes like just a job for me, I will probably just retire. I will be like, I will never be unhappy because I want to find the problems, the ways to solve these problems in a way that makes me happy. That's my goal. I mean, like, I may not be even find the solutions because I mean, sometimes like finding the solution is not the goal. Sometimes the journey is the goal, right? Like the journey itself is more important than like reaching the goal. Like and through the journey, you can find like fascination about certain things. You can find discoveries. You can find different things. You can find how different people do it differently, and you can make like friendship along the way, like with people. You may find like same-minded people. You can change the perspective of different perspectives of people, and that is also like very. It feels good when you open some possibilities and people like, oh my god, I had no idea. Like, I was talking to someone the other day and I was like, listen, I don't anymore type anything that longer than 3 words in any software. I don't have to do this. I figured this years ago. And if you're not doing it, I don't know what, like what are you doing with your life? Because when you have all the tools you need, like spell checking, translation, dictionaries, like thesaurus, like the etymology lookup, all these tools under your like fingertips. Why are you giving like, this is the power, you have it, you can do this. Don't do like, like do it in a way that is satisfactory, that brings you happiness, and you don't have to be like I'm not like extremely good programmer. I haven't like written like a piece of software that you can say like, oh, this is like, this is well known, like kind of a piece of software. I never even participated in like big projects that like, fascinating or like complex. I'm afraid I'm not like I'm a okay programmer. I'm not like great, no, neither terrible. But the way I see like this hacker's mindset, you don't need to be really good at programming. You just have to want to enjoy the craft, and sometimes even the things that nobody sees, it's also can bring you joy in a way that like other people will see it eventually. They'll see your joy, they'll see your fascination, they see your excitement, and that will bring people together to to continue your journey.
Yeah, and of course your enthusiasm, I can feel it. And what you said, like the journey matters more than the destination, connects to what you were saying earlier about the narratives and the stories we tell each other. And it's exactly this, the enthusiasm, right? Effectively, what you are sharing is that. It's not like, hey, here's the solution, goodbye. It's like, well, let me tell you about how I went about it, And
Right,
that is inspiring, and that communicates a way of looking at things which now inspires others to do something similar.
right.
Beautiful.
Yes, yes.
You know what? I have my puppies here, so I say we wrap this up. Maybe we can talk about one last point, which is what do you see yourself doing more with computers, Emacs, technology in general these days? Like, is there a specific theme, or is it what you have been doing basically since forever?
Um, I don't know. I have a backlog of certain ideas. Some ideas are, you know, are worth thinking about. Sometimes these ideas, they just like ideation. I like the term coined by Rich Hickey. He says like it's hammock time, right? Like the work happens in the hammock, like not at the in front of the computer. Sometimes yes, I would think about certain problems before going to sleep, or like when I'm in the shower meditating, and. There are certain like things like that I want to do better, and I don't have like good answers for it. And these days I gravitate towards understanding the corporal body of the, like, I want to tell stories. I like I like story, I like reading stories, I like hearing stories, I like storytelling. And I think the tools we have today, they are able to tell stories. We just need to like connect them together. Like, for example, when I'm looking at the piece of code, today I can like extract the story out of it, right? Like I can look at the git, like annotate, git blame, right? Like I can find like the like points on GitHub, or like another forge like GitLab or whatever like is used for the project. Then I can find like relevant PRs, like descriptions of that. Then like I can like search through Slack and like find like relevant stories. I can like but I think like we have all the tools necessary to be able to like look at the piece of code, like a specific line of code, and say like, hey, Dan 2 years ago said like was a problem because like somebody, another team said this is like security issue, it may like open vulnerability, like blah blah blah. And then like this unraveling the story to you, like that would be fascinating to see, like going through the code and seeing the story behind people, behind their
Up, what happened? I lost you. Oh, 1 second. This has happened before. Uh, let's log back into Jitsi. So, oh my goodness. No problem, no stress. Let's see. Hello. Sorry, my Jitsi dropped. And let me kick
oh
out my older connection. Kick out. Yeah, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, that's
it's all
good.
right.
So we're back. Yeah. Please continue with that thought. I lost you for a second there. So yeah,
uh,
please.
so right, I mean like the
So
storytelling
the
aspect.
story, you the Git and the story behind the code you were saying, yeah.
Right. Like I want to. I think I honestly think the AI community. I mean, like AI for a long time was a Lisp-driven thing.
Mm.
Lisp drove like all the innovation. The AI labs, they used Lisp, and then MIT switched to Python. And I think there are lots of times in human history where like we have this forgotten knowledge, right? Like we look at we forgot, like there are many like examples. We forgot like how Romans did the roads. Like we lost the technology, right? Like you can look at some like St. Paul Cathedral. We were in London, and I looked at it and I said, like, look at this beauty, like this marvel of like human technology at the time, and this was built like hundreds of years ago. We can, like, no money in the world can like makes us can like recreate this thing. Even like with all the technology, we probably won't be able to recreate the same thing. And like this is like we see it over and over in human history. And I think we lost certain momentum with, like, imagine if we didn't say, like, in the 1920s, we didn't say no to the electric cars. We like went with, like, we lost, like, we could have gone like 50 years of the battery research. We could have had like batteries that last like virtually forever, right? Like today, we lost that momentum, I think. And I think I genuinely think that we lost some momentum with, like, when we said, like, Lisp, like, let's switch to Python. Python is great language to a degree, but it's still not as. There are certain like things that like there are like whole class of like certain problems you can efficiently solve with using Lisp, even like Lisp of like not even modern Lisps, right? Like with old school Lisps, you can, like, there are certain like classes of problems you can more efficiently solve with using Lisp. And AI, I think we missed something. I think we still have all the tools in Lisp and Emacs, in other Lisp driven tools that can take us back, can, like, we can still like catch the momentum. We can build tools that are not we can do things today that it's like pretty much impossible to do in like other IDEs, right? Like, even like small things like indirect buffers. Like, I don't know, like, why. Is it because they don't see utility of it, or is it because technically it's like technology is like making it hard? The technological choices make it hard, like simple, like seemingly simple features like that, or org mode with the source blocks where they can pipe data between each other, like in different languages. I can do it today. I've done it, and I do it like a lot of times when I have like a HTTP request that gets sent out, like gets the data, and then that JSON gets piped into like a curl, like not curl, like the bash script block, and then like it like spins out the Python block, and then like spits out the and they like just pipe the data through each other, and that's something like that we haven't recreated. There are like lots of org mode clones. They like they using markup, but they still not able to recreate like certain features of work. You need Emacs to have like these features. Why? Is it because the technological choices make it hard, or it's because like people don't see utility in it, or there's certain like utility in certain tools, but it's kind of hidden behind like lots of like layers of the tacit knowledge that required that to get there to the point. And I know, I mean, like you can't just say like, oh, like just take it, it's a journey, and like some certain years you might be good with it. It's, of course, it's not a good answer. We need to find a better way to increase the visibility of things, of like just possibilities of things. If I'm pretty sure if like somebody showed like all different ways how like you can search in Emacs, even like with like minimal configuration, or even in vanilla Emacs, right? Like iSearch itself, just like iSearch by itself, like by default, it's fascinating piece of like feature of in software that a lot of people just don't know because it's hidden behind like certain layers, and it's specifically hidden specifically in for good reasons, right? Like you cannot go to like a professional pilot, like look at the cockpit of like 747 and say like, whoa, this is like complicated. Like, can we like replace it with like just a touch screen? They would be like, are you insane? This is complicated for a reason. I have to go like through certification, through years of learning, because like this, like this like little button can save lives, right? Like, but I needed like years of practice and training to learn where this button like is hidden, right? And Emacs kind of like have like similar vibe to it, and people like just like they just like want to come and like and have like, it's not like they want intuition, right? Like right away, but the intuition, you have to earn that intuition. And maybe like we need to be able to like kind of talk about this intuition, like talk about like what it feels like using iSearch, right? Like using like certain search tools in Emacs. Maybe we could do a better job.
Yeah, maybe. And just to close on that, maybe part of it is a technology constraint, but maybe part of it is also the mindset you have conditioned by the given technology you are using. Like earlier, you were telling me about how you think or in terms of Lisp, or you gave me this example of the world in infrared, like I see it and now I cannot unsee it. So maybe it's not the technology per se, but it's like the kind of programmer who programs in that way cannot reason the way a Lisp person does, a Lisp programmer does. And
I don't know.
maybe it's that even.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, there's no way of me going back and learning things I did, right? Like, it's just like, there's no way of me like looking back, and I can probably reflect on certain things, right? But I cannot like relive my experience in Emacs and say like, oh, I accept certain mistakes I made all like along the way. One of the biggest mistake I made, that I didn't see Emacs as the Lisp environment, Lisp machine, so to say, right? Like, I mean, like it's technically it's wrong to call it Lisp machine, because, but like let's forget about technicalities for just like for a moment. Like, let's call it a Lisp machine. And my mistake was, and like a lot of newbies also, I think they make this mistake. I'm coming to the editor that is powerful, that has certain features, and I just want to like learn about features. But if only I came to the understanding that Emacs is not just the editor, it's a Lisp machine with it like built-in editor in it, and everything I do, every single click, every single button, like every single key press is internalized into the Emacs call, and understanding these calls would have made my journey maybe better. But I don't know for sure, because maybe I needed to go through the pain of like confusion, misunderstanding, rebuilding my like configuration, like I don't know how many times I like did it, like declared bankruptcy and like start over. But I think if I just went with the list, went with like I hate it. Like I didn't hate it, but I misunderstood it in the beginning. It was like very cryptic. I didn't like know how to do things. I just like like I said, I'm an impatient programmer. I wanted like results fast enough, but if only I said to myself, like, listen, whatever you do, don't read it just another piece of software. It's a specific kind of software that operates as a Lisp machine, and you need to understand this language this machine operates on, right? So then it would have been maybe a different, like, I've gotten like, to the place where I am right now much faster. I wouldn't like have to waste like years of my life like being kind of in state of not like confusion, but state of like not like I don't know like what the like there was no intuition, right? Like the intuition came later after like and again I don't know, maybe I needed to go through this like painful journey.
Maybe, maybe, but as we have said already, it's the journey and it's the narrative which ultimately shapes your perspective. Very
Right.
interesting. Very.
Yeah.
I say we call it a day because I see the dogs. They are fighting with each other and they want to
Right.
go out for a walk.
Right. It was fascinating to talk to you. I like, I appreciate, like, it was difficult with the time differences, and I appreciate the length of like the effort you put into to like for it to happen. And I was very excited. I was very excited to talk to you before, and I was a little nervous, but like once you said hello, I was like, I felt like I'm talking to an old friend. It's like, I never felt like this is the first time we're meeting, and hopefully I will get a chance to meet you in person one day. Hopefully, if
Oh,
I'm
hopefully, yeah.
around. You're in Greece, right?
Cyprus. So yeah, but
You're in
it's
Cyprus.
thereabouts. It's close.
Right. Like, if I'm ever like over in that parts of the world, and if you're come to like, for a conference or any, for any reason to this part of the world, I am in Central, not Central America. I'm in, in Central Time Zone, and I'm just north of Dallas
Hmm.
today. I mean, like, I've moved around. Like Americans move a
Uh-huh.
lot. Um, I moved from, I was in New York, then California, and then I'm finally around Dallas. I probably will move again. So yeah. Anyway, if you're around here, I would absolutely we'll try to meet with you. Just let me know.
Thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Prot.
Likewise, because of course that would be really fascinating. We will geek out for 10 hours.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like the Emacs people are the favorite kind of people. My favorite kind of people. I find them very fascinating folks, and not because we're like same minded, but a lot of the different perspectives also. But I, 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 I am glad. I am very thankful to Emacs, not only because it showed me the fascinating new world of computing, but also it opened uh, the new world of like different communities, different like people like I speak, and I'm like I'm very honest saying that Emacs folk are like my favorite kind of people, um, because a lot of people I met in the community, they are fascinating. They have personalities. They have like the work they've done, the way of thinking and talking about certain things. I always like even just like simply talking to them.
Very well, very well.
Right.
So let's call it a day. I will close the call and then stop the recording, and then I will upload
All
it,
right.
and we take it from there. Thank you very
All
much for
right.
your time, and take care, and good luck with everything.
Same wise. Thank you. Thank you,
Bye
Prot.
bye, bye bye, bye bye. So closing here, and then I will just stop the recording. Take care, folks. Goodbye from my side.